Little by little, Laurent descended into raving madness. He resolved to drive Camilla from his bed. At first, he had slept fully dressed. Then he had avoided touching Therese's skin. In the end, out of rage and despair, he wanted to take his wife to his chest and crush her sooner than leave her to his spectral victim. It was a magnificent display of brutal passion in revolt. In short, only the expectation that Therese's kisses would cure him of his bouts of insomnia had drawn him to the young woman's bedroom. When he had found himself there, as master, his flesh, lacerated but yet more excruciating attacks, had not even considered attempting his cure. And he had stayed crushed like that for 3 weeks, forgetting that he had done everything to possess Therese and remaining unable to touch her, now that he did possess her without increasing his sufferings. His excessive anguish woke him from his mindless state. In the first stunned moment, in the queer dejection of the wedding night, he had been able to forget the reasons that he had just forced him into marriage. But under the repeated blows from his bad dreams, a dull anger stole into him, triumphing over his cowardice and restoring his memory. He remembered that he had married in order to drive away his nightmares by clasping his wife tight. So he took Therese abruptly in his arms one night, at the risk of brushing against the drowned man's body, and pulled her violently to him. The young woman had also been pushed to the limit. She would have thrown herself into the flames if she had thought the flames might cleanse her flesh and deliver her from these evils. She returned Laurent's embrace, determined either to be scorched by this man's caresses or to find relief in them. And they clasped each other in a horrible embrace. Pain and terror performed the office of desire. The office of desire. Wherever their limbs touched, they thought themselves fallen onto live coals. They uttered a cry and squeezed tighter, so as not to leave any space between them for the drowned man. And still they felt strips of Camille being wildly squashed between them, chilling their skin in places, while the rest of their bodies burned. Their kisses were atrociously cruel. Therese searched with her lips for Camille's bite on Laurent's stiff and bloated neck, and passionately glued her mouth to it. There the bride wound lay. Once this hurt was healed, the murderers could sleep in peace. The young woman understood this and tried to cauterize the hurt with the heat of her caresses. But she burned her lips, and Laurent pushed her back violently with a dull groan. He felt as if a red-hot iron was being set against his neck. Therese, terrified, came back to it and wanted to kiss the scar again. She felt a bitter and sensual delight in resting her mouth on that very patch of skin in which Camille's teeth had embedded themselves. For one moment she considered biting her husband on that same spot, tearing off a big piece of flesh and creating a new wound, yet deeper, which would remove the marks of the earlier one. And she said to herself that then she would no longer blench, seeing only the impress of her own teeth. But Laurent shielded his neck from her kisses. The searing pain was devouring him. He pushed her away whenever she stretched forth her lips. They struggled thus, groaning and writhing in the hellish caresses. They were well aware that they were only making their suffering worse. Crushed in vain by each dreadful grasp, screaming in pain, burning and bruising themselves, nothing would soothe their terrified nerves. Each embrace merely sharpened their disgust. While they were exchanging these hideous kisses, they were prey to terrible hallucinations. They imagined that the drowned man was pulling them out by their feet and violently jolting the bed. They broke off for a moment. They felt loathing and insuperable, nervous revolt. Then, not wishing to be beaten, they seized one another in a fresh clasp, and were again obliged to break off, as if red-hot spikes had pierced their limbs. Several times they attempted thus to triumph over their disgust, to forget everything by wearing out and shattering their nerves. And their nerves, chafed and stretched each time, caused them such agitation that remained in one another's arms. This fight with their own bodies had worked them up into raging fury. They were stubborn, wanting to get the better of it. A particularly acute attack finally shattered them with a shock of such unprecedented violence that they believed they were about to suffer an epileptic fit. Thrown back to the two sides of the bed, scorched and bruised, they began to sob. And, through their sobs, they seemed to hear the triumphant laughter of the drowned man, who crept once more under the sheet, sniggering. It had been impossible to drive him from the bed. They were beaten. Camille sprawled placidly between them, while Laurent bewailed his powerlessness, and Thérèse trembled to think that the corpse, in its position as lawful master, might fancy profiting from his victory by squeezing her, in his turn, in his rotted arms. They had tried to their utmost, faced with defeat. They understood that in future they would no longer dare to share even the tiniest kiss. The fit of crazed lovemaking that they had tried to induce in order to kill their terrors had just plunged them deeper into dread, feeling the cold of the corpse that must now keep them forever apart. They wept blood and tears, wondering what would become of them in their anguish.